I had never watched anyone choose to bleed before. That is the only way I know to begin. Not with the politics, not with the delegation that arrived at my gates on a morning so cold the iron hinges had frozen and had to be hammered open, not with my council's sneer when they read the letter and said, "Lowborn Alpha, she is no one of consequence." Begin with the moment I understood that I had never, in 37 years of ruling Ithranor, seen a human being decide to stay when every reasonable instinct was screaming for them to fall. The trial of standing was not supposed to apply to a peace delegate. My council had not told her that. By the time I learned what they had arranged, Senna of the Lowfield had already walked into the trial hall, and I had not stopped it in time, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. But she had not broken. That is the thing my council did not account for. That is the thing none of us accounted for. I am Aldrich of Ithranor, Alpha King of the Northern Pack, and this is the story of the woman who would not fall, and of what I became the day I finally understood why my wolf had been waiting for her since before she was born. The delegation arrived on the 14th of Frostmonth, 3 riders and a woman on a gray horse. I watched from the upper parapet because my steward had told me the lead delegate was a woman of no rank, sent by the Lowfield Council as a courtesy envoy. Nothing that requires your presence at the gate, Alpha, and I had believed him, which was the first mistake. I did not know her name yet. I watched her dismount and thought, she is small. Not weak. I have been a king long enough to know the difference, though I confess I did not know it as clearly then as I know it now. She was small the way a good blade is small, everything concentrated, nothing wasted. She wore a gray cloak that had been mended twice at the shoulder, good boots, no jewelry. She looked up at the walls of Ithranor, the black stone, the iron gates, the ice-sheeted faces of the mountain above, and she did not flinch. Most people flinch. The mountain is designed to produce that effect. She tilted her head as if she was simply deciding whether the architecture was interesting, and then she walked through the gate. My wolf stirred. I had not felt him move in 3 years, not since my mate's death, not since the long gray winter that followed it. He did not surge or howl. He simply noticed. Like a man lifting his head from a fire he has been staring at too long, surprised to find there is still a room around him. I told him to settle. He did. I went back inside. Her name was Senna. I learned this from my council's briefing that afternoon, delivered by my first counselor Mard, who had the particular tone of a man explaining why something is of no importance that only people of no importance use, precise, dismissive, a little bored. She carries the Lowfield Council's proposal regarding the northern trade routes, Mard said, a goodwill gesture. They could not send anyone of actual rank. Their Lord Warden is ill. His heir is occupied with the Harvest Tribunal. This woman is a clerk of some kind, a scribe. She handles their written correspondence. Her rank, I asked. None, Alpha, Lowfield-born common stock. The council thought it worth receiving the letter at least. The woman herself is of no consequence. He set the briefing document on my desk. The trial of standing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The delegation will observe. I looked up. She is to observe the trial. Mard's expression did not change. The delegation is to observe, yes, standard diplomatic protocol. I said nothing. I should have asked more. I should have asked exactly which members of the delegation were meant to stand in the observation gallery and which were meant to stand in the ring. I did not ask. I assumed my council knew the difference between a spectator and a participant, and I returned to the trade documents, and that was the second mistake. The trial of standing is an old rite in Ithranor. It was designed for young wolves of the pack who wish to prove themselves, a test of endurance before the assembled pack, 3 rounds against our champion fighter, the goal not to win but to rise. A wolf who rises after each fall is deemed to have standing. A wolf who does not rise loses standing and must earn it back through years of ordinary service. It is a trial for wolves. It has never been administered to a human. When I walked into the trial hall the next morning and saw Senna standing in the center ring in her gray cloak, I stopped moving. The hall was full. Word had spread, the Alpha's council had ensured it. I would understand later because they wanted this to be a lesson. A lesson to the Lowfield about what happened when you sent a low-born clerk to Ithrander's gates instead of a ranked lord. A lesson that would be reported back and remembered. Senna was looking at the pack surrounding the ring. Hundreds of wolves, most of them in partial shift, their eyes gold with the light of the old blood. She was the only human in the hall. She was not a large woman, perhaps 5.5 feet, slight through the shoulders, the mended cloak making her look smaller still. She was holding herself with the particular stillness of someone who is not afraid because they are pretending. That kind of stillness is brittle. You can see the seams. But with the stillness of someone who has looked at what is coming and made their decision already. I started moving toward the ring. My steward caught my arm. Alpha, the council has authorized. This trial was not authorized by me, I said. The first counselor is not the Alpha King. But I was too far. The horn had already sounded. Brock, my pack's champion, a wolf 6.5 feet tall, built like a siege engine, a man who had won the Trial of Champions 3 years running, was already stepping into the ring. Senna looked at him. Then she looked at me. Our eyes met across the hall, and I saw something in her face that I did not know how to name then and have since come to recognize as the most important thing I know about her. She had already decided. She was not going to ask me to stop it. She was not going to ask anyone for anything. She turned back to Brock and settled her feet. Brock did not hold back. He was not a cruel man. I want to be clear about that because what happened was not cruelty, it was instruction. And the instruction came from my counsel, not from him. He hit her cleanly, without excess, a single blow to her left shoulder that sent her into the ring's edge. She hit the ground on her hands and knees. The hall was quiet. There is a particular quality to that kind of quiet, not silence, but the held breath of a crowd that is waiting to see whether someone will get up. Senna got up. Not slowly. Not in the way of someone calculating whether it is worth it. She rose the way water rises in a sealed vessel steadily, because that is what it does. She found her feet. She turned back to Brock. Her shoulder was already darkening where the blow had landed, the bruise beginning its slow bloom through the gray wool, and she did not look at it, and she did not look at my counsel, and she did not look at me. She settled her feet again. My wolf went absolutely, completely still, not the stillness of sleep, the stillness of recognition. I felt it the way you feel a sound you have been waiting for without knowing you were waiting. A bell ringing in a room you had forgotten was inside you. Something behind my ribs, something warm and old and certain. I did not know what it meant yet. I told myself it was the strangeness of the situation. I told myself it was the cold air of the trial hall doing something odd to my chest. I did not stop the trial. That is on me. Whatever else I tell you, whatever explanation I give for the political tangle my counsel had made, I could have stopped it after the first fall. I could have walked into the ring. I did not. I stood at the edge of the hall and I watched, and the only excuse I have, and it is not a good one, is that I was trying to understand what I was seeing. Brock hit her again. The second blow took her off her feet entirely. She went down hard, rolling, and I heard the breath go out of her, and I heard the hall react, not with cruelty. Most of the pack was not cruel, but with the particular discomfort of watching something that should not be happening and not knowing who has the authority to name that truth aloud. Several wolves near me shifted uneasily. A few turned away. She lay still for a breath, 2 breaths. My wolf surged against the wall I had built around him, and I pushed back hard, the way you push back against something that is trying to show you something you are not ready to see. She pushed herself up. I watched her arms shake with the effort. I watched her find one knee, then the other, then her feet. She had lost a few inches off her careful stillness. There was something happening in her face now, something that was not fear and was not rage, but was older than both of them. It was the look of someone who has already been past this threshold before, in some previous version of their life, and has already learned that they are still there on the other side of it. She turned back to Brock, and she lifted her hands. This is what I mean when I say I did not know anyone could choose to bleed. She was not foolish. She knew exactly what was coming. She was not numb. I could see from where I stood that the shoulder had begun to genuinely hurt, that the fall had cost her something real. She was not performing for the hall because she was not looking at the hall. She was simply standing there in her mended gray cloak, with her hands up, in front of a man who could and would hit her again, because she had decided that she was going to stand through this. And so she was going to stand through this, and that was the entirety of it. I had been Alpha King of Ithranor for 17 years. I had been a wolf for 37. I had seen courage, the kind of courage that wolves understand, the kind that runs at danger with teeth and claws and the hot blood of the fight in it. I had never seen this kind. My wolf stopped pressing against my walls. He simply sat down inside me, in the way a creature sits when it has understood something important, and waited. Alpha, my steward said quietly beside me, this should. I know, I said, don't speak to me right now. Brock looked at her. Then he looked at me. He was asking me to stop it. I could see the question in his gold eyes, the discomfort of a man who is good at his work but has run out of reasons to do it. I held up one hand, one more, not because I wanted to see her fall again, because I needed to see what she would do. Because something in me had become completely, absolutely incapable of looking away. Brock hit her. The third blow was harder than the first two. He had been holding back. She had made him hold back by refusing to give him a reason to stop, and a part of him had responded by increasing the force, not out of cruelty, but out of some instinct that said surely this will be enough. Surely this will be the one that makes her ask for it to stop. He hit her and she flew backward into the ring's edge, and the edge caught her and she went down, and this time she did not immediately move. The hall went entirely silent. Not the held breath silence of before, the silence of a room where something has shifted. I was already moving before I knew I was moving. It was not a decision. There was no counsel of my thoughts, no weighing of political implications, no calculation about what it would look like for the Alpha to walk into the trial ring mid-session. My wolf surged through every wall I had spent 3 years building, and I went with him, and I walked into the ring. Brock stepped back immediately. He read my eyes and stepped back, and I was grateful to him for that later, and I told him so. Senna was on her hands and knees again. She had found that position by the time I reached her. She had pushed herself up again, because of course she had, because she was Senna, and that is what she does, and she was breathing carefully. The way you breathe when something genuinely hurts and you are deciding how to manage it. I knelt in front of her. This was not a thing the Alpha King of Ithranor does. The Alpha does not kneel. The entire hall knew this. The entire hall was watching. She looked up at me. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, steady as a held flame. There was dust on her face where she had hit the ground, and the shoulder of her cloak was torn now, and she was breathing harder than she should have been. And she looked up at me with those eyes and said, in a voice that was entirely level, I have one more fall in me, if the trial requires it. My wolf howled, not in aggression, in something I had no name for, something between reverence and grief, and the particular ache of recognizing something you have been missing for years without knowing you were missing it. I felt the bond ignite. There is no other word for it. It was not gradual, it was not a slow warmth, not a dawning understanding. It was ignition. Something in my chest that had been cold for 3 years flared open, and my mark, the Alpha's mark, the deep gold brand on my left forearm that had been dormant since my mate's death, burned to life. Not pain, the opposite of pain, recognition. and on Senna's wrist, on the pale skin just above her glove, the matching mark bloomed gold. She looked at it, then she looked at me. "I don't know what that is," she said, still in that level voice. "I know," I said. "I'll explain." "Is the trial over?" I looked around the hall. Hundreds of wolves, every one of them gold-eyed, every one of them watching us, watching the mark on her wrist, watching me kneeling in the center ring, watching the bond that was lighting up the air between us like something physical. "The trial," I said, loudly enough for the hall to hear, "was never supposed to happen. What this woman was subjected to was not protocol. It was an arranged degradation by members of my council, and I take full responsibility for failing to prevent it." I paused. "And I will deal with that separately." Silence. "As for the trial of standing, she has passed it. She rose 3 times. There is not a wolf in this hall who has done more." I looked at my first counselor, Mard, who had gone the color of old ash. I let him see my face. Then I turned back to Senna. She was looking at the mark on her wrist again. She touched it once, carefully, with one finger, the gesture of someone taking inventory, and then she lowered her hand and looked back at me. "I'm going to need to sit down," she said. "Yes," I said, "I know." I put my arm around her carefully, mindful of the shoulder, and I helped her stand. And the whole hall, all of Ithranir's wolves, who had stood there and watched a human woman be knocked down 3 times in the trial ring, went to one knee. Not for me, I was already standing. For her. I carried her to the infirmary. This is the literal truth. She made it as far as the doorway of the trial hall before her legs decided they had given enough, and I caught her before she hit the floor, and I carried her the rest of the way, and I want to be clear that she objected to this, very quietly but thoroughly, for the entire walk. "I can walk," she said, approximately 4 separate times. "I know," I said, approximately 4 separate times, and kept walking. The healer, old Ren, who had been mending Ithranir's wolves since before I was born, took one look at the shoulder, one look at the mark on Senna's wrist, one look at my face, and did not say anything at all. This is one of the things I have always valued about Ren. The shoulder was bruised, not broken. The ribs had taken some bruising from the fall. Nothing that would not heal. "Give me the room," I said when Ren had finished. Ren gave me the room. Senna was sitting on the edge of the infirmary cot, her cloak off now, in a linen shirt with the right sleeve rolled up to show the mark. She was looking at it with the same focused attention she had turned on everything else since her arrival. The mountain, Brock me, taking inventory, understanding what is in front of you before you decide what to do with it. "The mark," I said, sitting in the chair across from her. "I owe you an explanation." "Yes," she said. "In Ithranir and in most wolf pack traditions, there is a thing called the fated bond, a destined mate, someone the wolf recognizes as his own across whatever distance or time separates them. The mark is the sign of it. It appears when the bond ignites, and it ignites when the wolf recognizes his mate." She was quiet for a moment. "The mark is on your arm as well," she said. "Yes." "It appeared at the same time as mine." "Yes." "Which means," she said slowly, "that your wolf recognized me as your mate." "Yes." She looked at the mark again. "I'm a low-born clerk from the Lowfield," she said. "My family keeps records for the council. My mother was a seamstress." "I know. You're the Alpha King of Ithranir." "I know that too. I want to be precise about this," she said, "because I have been hit in the head 3 times this morning, and I want to make sure I am understanding correctly." I felt something that I had not felt in 3 years shift in my chest, something that was not yet a smile but was, perhaps, the memory of one. "You were hit in the shoulder and the ribs mostly," I said, "not the head." "That is a very precise distinction." "I'm a very precise man." She looked at me, And then, to my complete surprise, a small sound escaped her, not quite a laugh, but the cousin of one. It was brief. It was tired. It was the most genuine thing I had heard from another person in years. "All right," she said. "Tell me what a fated bond means in practical terms." "It means," I said, "that my wolf has recognized you as the person he was made for, as mine. It means that the bond, once ignited, is permanent. It does not fade. It does not transfer. It means that you are, by every tradition Ithranor holds, my Luna." She absorbed this carefully. "I have not agreed to that," she said. "I know. The bond it's something that happened to us, not a choice I made." "That is correct. So I'm under no obligation." "None," I said. "The bond is destined. That does not make it compelled. You are free to leave Ithranor tomorrow morning. The mark will stay because that is the nature of the bond, but I would not hold you here, and I would not ask anything of you that you have not chosen to give." She was quiet for a long moment. "You could have stopped the trial," she said. The shift in her voice told me she was not accusing me. She was being precise, taking inventory again. "Yes," I said, "I should have. I failed to ask the questions I should have asked before it began, and I failed to stop it when I understood what was happening. I am sorry for that." "Why didn't you?" I thought about how to answer honestly. "Because I was trying to understand what I was watching," I said. "Because I had not seen anything like you before." She thought about this. "That's an odd thing to say," she said. "It's an odd morning," I said. She looked at the mark on her wrist again, and then she looked at me, and something in her face settled, not softened exactly, but settled, the way a scale settles when it has found its balance. "I'll stay through the end of the trade negotiations," she said. "The Lowfield Council sent me to deliver a proposal, and I intend to deliver it." "Of course," I said. "And then I'll need time," she said, "to think." "Take whatever time you need." She nodded, and then she looked at the window. The blizzard was coming down outside, the gray sky pressing close to the black stone of the keep, and she said very quietly, "I rose every time." "Yes," I said, "you did. I want you to know that wasn't for you. I didn't know you were watching. I wasn't trying to impress anyone." She paused. "I just don't fall when people expect me to." I felt my wolf settle deeper into that warm certainty, the kind of knowing that has no edges and no doubt in it. "I know," I said. She stayed. Not immediately, not easily. There was a week of formal negotiations in which she delivered the Lowfield proposal with a precision and a clarity that left my trade council scrambling, because they had brought their second-tier negotiators expecting a clerk, and found instead someone who knew exactly what every clause in the proposal meant, and was prepared to defend every one of them with documentary evidence she had memorized on the road. My first counselor, Mard, who had arranged the trial, and had survived my private conversation with him, only because Senna had said, quietly, that she would prefer I keep my counsel intact while the negotiations were ongoing, sat through those sessions in the particular silence of a man who has understood that he has profoundly misjudged something important. She was polite to him throughout. This was, I thought, either extreme generosity or the most refined form of contempt I had ever witnessed. I suspected it was both. The trade proposal was agreed within 10 days. Senna sent the signed documents back to the Lowfield with one of my fastest couriers, and a covering letter she drafted in my library in 40 minutes while I watched her work and tried to pretend I was reading something. "You're watching me," she said without looking up. "Yes," I said. "Why?" I thought about this. "I'm not sure I have a reason that would satisfy either of us," I said. She looked up then. The firelight was doing something to her face. She was not a woman of dramatic beauty, Senna, not in the way of the court ladies my counsel had occasionally presented to me in the years after my mate's death. She was precise-featured, dark-eyed, with the particular kind of face that gets better the longer you look at it, that has more in it than you can take in at once. She looked at me the way she looked at everything, directly, without apology. "You could simply say you find me interesting," she said. "I find you extraordinary," I said. A pause. "That's a large word," she said. "I tend to mean what I say." She held my gaze for a moment, and then she looked back at her letter, and something at the corner of her mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was something I immediately wanted to see again. She finished the letter. She folded it and sealed it. She set it on the stack of documents and looked at her hands for a moment, and then she looked at the mark on her wrist. "I've been thinking," she said. "I know. You don't know what I've been thinking." "No," I said. "I'm sorry, go on." "I've been thinking," she said again, "about what it means to be the kind of person who doesn't fall when they're expected to fall." She paused. "I've been that person my whole life, the low-born girl who was supposed to know her place, the clerk who wasn't supposed to have opinions, the woman who was sent here because no one of consequence was available, and who was therefore, my counsel assumed, of no consequence." She looked at the mark. "And then this happened," she said, "which is not something I planned for, not something I would have predicted, not something I have any framework for." "No," I said. "I don't know how to be a Luna," she said. "I know how to keep records. I know how to read a contract. I know how to get back on my feet." She looked at me. "I don't know how to be what Ithranor would need." "I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are," I said. "What you are is what my wolf recognized." She was quiet for a long time. "I'm going to need to go home," she said finally. "Talk to my family, think." "Of course." "I'm not saying no," she said. "I want to be precise about that. I'm saying I need time." "I know. And I need," she stopped. "I need to know that what you're asking for is me, not a Luna, not a symbol, not a political solution, me." I looked at her across the fire-lit library, this woman in her Mendied clothes who had risen from the floor of my trial hall 3 times and was now negotiating with me for the terms of her own heart, and I said, "Yes, you, specifically, entirely." She nodded once, that inventory look again, weighing, measuring, deciding. "I'll come back," she said. "I know," I said, and my wolf settled deeper into the certainty of it and was still. She came back in the spring. Not in the way of a grand return, no announcement, no delegation, no ceremony. A single rider at the gates on a morning when the mountain was beginning to show its first green, leading a gray horse with a worn saddlebag. My gate wolf sent word and I went down myself, which was something the Alpha King of Ithranor also does not typically do, and my steward caught up with me at the courtyard door to tell me this, and I explained to him, politely but thoroughly, that I was the Alpha King of Ithranor, and therefore this was something the Alpha King of Ithranor was doing today. She was in the courtyard when I came through the door, dusty from the road, her gray cloak exchanged for a brown one that had also been mended at the shoulder. She looked at me. I looked at her. "I talked to my family," she said. "How did that go?" "My mother cried. My father was very quiet for a long time and then said he was not surprised." A pause. "He said he'd always thought I was too stubborn for ordinary life." "He's not wrong," I said. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. "He's not," she agreed. "I also thought about what you said, about wanting me specifically." "Yes. I want to know," she said, "if that holds when I am difficult. Because I should tell you this honestly, I am frequently difficult. I have opinions about everything. I keep finding errors in other people's accounting. I once argued with a lord twice my age for 40 minutes about the meaning of a subordinate clause in a treaty document." "Who won?" I said. "I did," she said. Obviously, the subordinate clause was quite clear. He was misreading the antecedent. "I'm very glad you're back," I said. She looked at me for a moment, and something in her face did something I had not seen before, Not the inventory, not the careful measuring, but something that opened, something that decided. "I'm going to need a desk," she said. "A proper one, not a clerk's desk. A desk of my own in a room of my own where I can work." Done. And I'm not going to stop being precise about things simply because I've become a Luna. If your counsel produces bad documents, I will tell them. I'm counting on it. And if anyone in this pack ever does to anyone else what was done to me in that trial hall, it will not happen again, I said. I have already restructured the council's authority over the trial protocols, and Mard no longer has independent authorization for any pack ritual. He is on final notice. She nodded, inventory complete. "All right," she said. "All right," I said. She held out her wrist, where the mark still lived, warm gold against the pale skin. I held out mine. When they met wrist to wrist, mark to mark, the bond sang through us both, warm and old and completely, absolutely certain, and my wolf was still in a way I had not known he could be still, because he had everything he needed. "I rose every time," she said softly. "I know," I said. "I was there." "I want you to know something," she said. "When I was on my hands and knees in that ring, the third time I heard you walk in. I heard the change in the hall when you crossed the ring's edge. I knew you were coming." "I know," I said. "You still had your hands up." "Yes," she said, "because I wasn't rising for you. I wasn't rising for the pack." She met my eyes. "But I'm glad you came." "So am I said. "I'm sorry it took me as long as it did." She considered this with her usual precision. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Just don't be late again." "I won't," I said. And I meant it the way I mean everything, entirely, without qualification, for as long as there is breath in me. The naming ceremony was held in the trial hall. This was Senna's suggestion, and when she made it, I understood exactly why, and I agreed without hesitation. The pack gathered in the hall where she had fallen and risen, the hall where my wolf had surged through 17 years of walls and made a king kneel, and she walked in a dress of deep gray wool, not gold, not the traditional Luna's white, gray, which was her color, which was the color she had worn when she arrived at my gates on a frozen morning and looked at the mountain and decided it was interesting, and the mark on her wrist glowed warm in the torchlight. I said her name before the pack. I named her Luna of Ithranor. I said what she had done in this hall, without flinching, without anger, without begging for anyone to stop what was happening. I said it plainly, because it deserved to be said plainly, not dressed in ceremony. I said that she had shown this pack what standing looked like. And the pack went to one knee again, all of them. Mard last, and slower than the rest, and with the look of a man who understands, finally, what he failed to understand before, but he went down. He went down because there was nothing else in the world that made sense to do in front of the woman who had risen from his trial's floor and come back in the spring. Senna looked at the hall full of kneeling wolves. Then she looked at me. "You can stand up," she said to the hall. They stood. There was something in the air after, not reverence exactly, though there was reverence in it, but something warmer, something that a pack learns when they have watched the right thing happen. They had seen a woman be treated as nothing and rise into something the pack had not expected, and they had been changed by it, the way you are changed by watching something true. She took my hand, small and certain and warm, and the mark on her wrist against the mark on mine, and the bond quiet and complete between us. "Difficult," she reminded me, very quietly for my ears only. "I know," I said. "Frequently." "I know. And I'll find every error." "I'm counting on it," I said. "Ithranor has needed someone to find its errors for a long time." She looked at the hall, and then she looked at the mountain through the high windows. The mountain she had looked at on the morning she arrived. The mountain she had decided was interesting, not frightening, because that is who she is, and something in her face was warm and open and entirely hers. I had been Alpha King of Ithranor for 17 years. I had ruled in cold and grief and the long gray winter that follows loss. I had told myself in those years that a king does not need what a man needs, that leadership is enough, that duty is enough, that the pack is enough. I had been wrong about all of it. What I know now is this. There is a specific kind of courage that has nothing to do with claws or teeth or the hot blood of a fight. A courage that lives in the quiet decision to stay when every reasonable thing says fall. And it is rarer than any power I have ever seen. And it is the thing that undid 17 years of walls in a single morning. And I am grateful every day for every wall it knocked down. She would not fall when they expected her to. She never has. She never will. And I have not been late since.